Hey Steve, what event or events have transpired in your life that still has a ripple effect in your life to this day?
Hey, Eric, that's a great question. There's so many,
Yeah,
but a couple are springing to mind now, some really impactful ones. And I guess they're the ones to share with our audience.
sure. Well, good. So more on that in a moment. But first,
Hello, I'm Steve.
and I'm Eric. And together we are two dads with one mission.
Welcome to the 𝗙𝗍𝗃 podcast. This is the show for dads, all about fatherhood, faith, and freedom, one conversation at a time.
All right, cool. So Steve, tell us more about these events that have caused this ripple effect in your life.
Yeah, there's two really. So I'm going to talk about probably the first one that goes way, way back. And I'm talking 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
So my very first job, I had just an amazing boss. Okay. And that boss became almost like a father figure, a second father to me at the time. And I was a young 17, 18-year-old young whippersnapper.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, very green behind the ears, as a phrase we use here in the UK. And also, if I'm really honest, back then I was quite an obnoxious young kid.
No, not you, Steve.
Yeah, and if some older guy tried to share some insights with me, I wouldn't have seen it as insight. So he shared a couple of wisdom, well, lots and lots, but a couple of things that really spring to mind when we were working together. And 2 phrases he would always use is like, Steve, the world doesn't owe you a living. Always used to say that, Steve, the world doesn't owe you a living.
I love those kind of things.
And the second thing that he always used to say was, you don't get nothing for free. Okay. Right. There's nothing for free in this world, and the world doesn't owe you a living. Along with hundreds of other things, which only really resonated with me. And I kind of, it's almost like joined the dots and the penny dropped. Just how valuable his information and the learnings, because he was giving me teachings in the workplace and life.
But it wasn't until you kind of matured a little bit that you really took the value of those words.
When I matured and kind of founded my own company and then had employees myself, it then kind of all made sense, all the things that he was telling me and those couple of phrases, because I'd have employees who thought the world owed them a living. And
look, those 2 phrases defeat the 2 biggest things that we see in the world today, at least in the United States, and that's kind of this people just playing victim, and then an entitlement mentality, right? So that those words of wisdom that he shared with you are kind of timeless, but I think those 2 specific types of wisdom have just really been lost on a cultural level today.
Definitely. And then in terms of kind of, they've had this kind of ripple effect, or as I like to say, look, you'll never know how far a change will go.
Right.
Now, they help to kind of shape my own culture that I created in the workplace that I founded. And more importantly, fundamentally shaped the person that I then was to become, if that kind of makes sense. So you'll never know how far that change will go. And how do you know someone has such a transformational ripple effect on you? If it's an individual, how do you know? It's really simple. You remember their name, 3-4 decades later. The guy's name was Andrew Terry. He was the best boss I ever had.
Right. Yeah. Like, for example,
I've had other bosses since. I couldn't remember their names.
I've had, I don't know how many teachers I've had from grade school to college. Let's say it's 100, but there's probably less than a handful of those teachers that I remember their name. Because of the words that they spoke to me. So that's a great idea or indicator that somebody has changed your life when you remember their name.
I
mean, I meet people, I can meet people today and forget their name tomorrow because they just didn't leave any impact on me. But when you remember somebody that was 30 years ago, that really says something.
It's really interesting what you talked about school then as well, in terms of, again, I must have had 30 30 teachers or so over the years that I was in school.
Right.
And I remember one real name springs to mind right now out of all those teachers. So it's strange that and that's it. And that's because, again, you'll never know how far a change will go. There was some real transformational learnings from that teacher that have stuck with me, and again, ultimately shaped the person that I became today.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a second story. So that was kind of the first one, which goes way back, and then one which is more closely. So round about, I'm probably going back 8-9 years ago. I had a training and coaching practice at the time with my good friend, and my good friend and business partner had some previous colleagues from a previous role, and we were on a Zoom call one day in the office, just catching up. It's a guy called Mark. Mark was talking to one of his friends in, of all places, Sao Paulo, Brazil, having a chat on Zoom. It's going across on the other side of the office, and he said, "Oh, I'll introduce you to Steve." My ears pricked up. I heard my name, and he said, "I'll come over." So I kind of came over, got in frame on the camera, and introduced myself. And we just talked about what Mark and I were creating, and it was the infancy of our training and coaching business, and we started to talk about some of the things, including hypnotherapy and hypnosis. So we were training therapists and hypnotherapy when I did a lot of training and coaching back in the day, and we kind of just talked about that and what it was, and then thought nothing of it. 3 months then pass, and we have a catch up. Guy was Michael from Sao Paulo, Brazil. We get Michael back on a Zoom call. Right. And in that 3 months from kind of talking passionately about what we were doing in the UK, that same evening from the first Zoom call, he had a conversation with his wife. His wife was in a really well-paid, secure role with Mercedes-Benz over in Sao Paulo. But within a week or two of that conversation, she then got really interested in hypnosis and hypnotherapy, trained on it in Brazil, left that job, created her own coaching practice. And by the time we got back on the Zoom with Michael 3 months later, she had actively seen clients and was already transforming and changing people's lives across the other side of the world as a direct result of that conversation we had 3 months prior.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wow, you will never know how far the change will go from that one conversation.
Both of these stories remind me of a Bible verse, and some of you may have heard it, but it's Proverbs 25:11, and it says, "A word fitly spoken." Okay, so obviously the things that were said in both of these stories were words that were fit or correct for the moment, but the Bible likens a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. So it's a pretty kind of highfalutin image that it creates, but think about that. Apples of gold and pictures of silver. It's like the value of a word fitly spoken is hard to measure, and the ripple effect over somebody's life that you didn't even see that. Nobody even expected that connection, right? But somehow that ripple hit her, and it was just the right time for her, or maybe she'd been thinking about doing something else, who knows, but it prompted her. Like if you imagine a ripple going through a water, right? It tends to push things in front of it. And so these words fitly spoken, I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and I often think about the power of my words and how that pushes her along, or the other thing that a ripple effect can do is have a negative effect, right? It can cause it to kind of swamp over somebody and maybe sink them. It has a negative impact. So sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, I think when you live a few years, you realize that's not true. And like you said earlier, Steve, bones will mend, but words can impact somebody forever if they don't process it correctly. So
absolutely, they can be unresolved till the day you die.
I've had my own issues with words that I can remember my mom and my dad had a tumultuous relationship. It was fraught with alcoholism and heavy cigarette smoking addiction and fighting and abuse and all this kind of stuff. And I can remember my dad sitting me and my sister down saying, the only reason we're staying together is because of you guys. And it's like, that was not a good thing to tell kids. And it's just, that impacted me for years, you know, and so the ripple effect, it like carried me along, but it pushed me in the wrong direction, you know. And it's like, I don't know, not to push this analogy too far, but at some point I had to kind of get my own oar and like change directions, because I just kept being carried along by these negative words. So
yeah, I mean, well, I want to just share something, a phrase that it just came up in my mind then, and I think it's quite fitting from what you've just said. It's like, look, we have the ability to weaponize our words.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So we can weaponize our words, and we can either use them for good, or we can use them negatively and have negative impacts. You know, so our words can be weaponized. So you know, Eric and I'm sure I speak for both of us here, Eric, when I use your name, hopefully not in vain. There, you know, we implore you to obviously weaponize your words and use them for positive effects. You know, not only in your life, but you know, in everyone you communicate and interact with, from roundabout now until the day you die.
I couldn't agree more. And I love making contact with people, because you know, you never know what's going to happen with two people just connecting, even if it's just random. I mean, I've had people just kind of randomly reach out to me on Messenger, and you know, it almost seems like maybe spam initially, but then you start having this whole conversation and it turns into this really valuable connection. And so I love that kind of randomness that can happen when people connect, and the ripple effect that's caused from that. So, you know, how far can these things take you? Well, they can carry you along for the rest of your life.
Definitely. And in talking about that, I just want to emphasize, you know, a little bit about that story, true story about Sao Paulo, and obviously Michael, and I can't remember Michael's partner, his wife at the time, but you know, from Mercedes-Benz to a hypnotherapy practice. But just think about that, and this is the concept that I want you to think about as you're listening to this this podcast episode. Is, you know, you'll never know how far a change will go. One conversation with one person, who then had a conversation, Mike had a conversation with his partner about that. One became two. And then that person opened her own hypnotherapy practice and actively saw clients. This was 8 or 9 years ago. Potentially, she has gone on to see hundreds, if not thousands, of clients since then. And those hundreds and thousands of clients have transformed something in their life, which has had a direct impact on their family. And so even their partners and their children, or their siblings in that unit. So I want you to just think about expansively, like you'll never know how far that change will go. And it started with a conversation on a Zoom call with one person that could have potentially now impacted across the other side of the planet, you know, hundreds, if not tens of thousands of people by this time. And that conversation took place just, you know, 8, 9 years ago. I'm excited by that opportunity and that possibility that, you know, if we weaponize our words in a positive way, that we have this ability to impact others. And it's one of the founding principles, and one of the reasons why, you know, you and I got together, Eric. It's like, it's what drives us on our like dads. It's hopefully, you know, you'll never know how far that change will go. We'll give some insight or make some sort of a connection with someone in the words that we're using on these podcasts, but we'll give someone some solace today that they didn't have yesterday, and enable them to kind of be pushed forward on that ripple and go out and do something, you know, positive, you know, for others. And just understand that no matter how small and insignificant it seems at the time, you're having the ongoing ripple effect in the world. You know, that excites me, knowing how expansive that can be from just this one small gesture, which could go so far.
Right. I mean, to the point where, you know, in these stories that you've been telling, you know, it's led to you doing No Limit Dads.
Absolutely.
You know, it's led to us getting together because we have very similar, you know, visions and goals to help men. So we're all part of a ripple that started who knows when. Because
Eric, you and I somehow managed, and I say I don't know when that started. It could have started years before we connected, but we connected, and we're part of that ripple, or two ripples that kind of came together and kind of, you know, met in the middle. You know, and you know, it's magical, the fact that you and I now have an opportunity to work together to help transform you know, and change people, because you'll never know how far our changes will go for others, you know, and that's exciting for me.
Yeah.
But it's
Well,
about time
that seems like a great place to put a bow tie on this episode.
like minds. I was just thinking exactly the same, Eric.
Yeah. So listen, if you've gotten value out of this episode, please subscribe, hit the bell notification so you get notifications when we put out a new episode, which we do every week. It comes out on Thursday. And if there's anything that you want us to talk about, any subject matter, please just don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to address it for you.
Yeah, and in order to reach out to us, you just need to do one thing.
Yep.
Open your favorite browser and just type in www.allieddads.com. You'll find our landing page there with information on how to reach us.
Absolutely. And hey, just so you know, our next episode is going to be called Get in the Game. So look forward to that in about a week. All right. Thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah, good speaking to you all. Great speaking to you again today, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.